A few months ago, I released a video talking about how older horror games were scarier than modern horror games because of the low poly graphics being far more unsettling, making your mind fill in the blanks a lot of the time to what the hell you're even looking at. Needless to say, the video kinda popped off, and I had a lot of people who agreed with me on this, and a lot of people who didn't agree. Oh, and a bunch of people just calling me a twat. Well, in that video, I specifically point out a lot of the horrors being from these two consoles. It was the perfect era for those freaky ass low poly creepy models haunting your dreams. Spyro knows who you are. Spyro is always watching as you play. Even when you turn off the console, he's always watching. Out of these two, I personally put a lot more time into the Nintendo 64. I mean, what can I say? Diddy Kong Racing is better than Crash Team Racing. I don't make the rules here. So that's why this video is going to be focused on the shit that terrified me in the games I personally played on the Nintendo 64 as a dumbass kid. And there were a lot of things that traumatized me. And it's all because of that creepy ass, liminal low poly style. And other factors too, but we'll talk about them when the time comes. Absolutely none of the games I'll be talking about in this video are horror games in the slightest, by the way, making these creepy things even more interesting to me. Also, I just want to point out that this video is highly subjective, so you're not allowed to laugh at these things that traumatized me, even though some of them are kinda stupid looking back on it. I'm being serious, you're not allowed to laugh. The first racing game I ever played on the Nintendo 64 was a little kart racing game called Diddy Kong Racing, a game that is so good and still holds up to the point that I would still rather play it over Mario Kart 8. The cast in Diddy Kong Racing was a bunch of characters from Rareware games, back when they actually made games other than Sea of Thieves. You got Banjo-Kazooie, you got Diddy Kong himself, and you have Conker, before he became an alcoholic. I wonder if he became one from losing so many times in the races. At a glance, Diddy Kong Racing is a bright, vibrant, colourful game. And yeah, I mean it is. But trust me, there are some creepy ass things in this game. In Diddy Kong Racing, at the end of every world, there's a boss fight you have to do against some big ass animal. And most of them aren't scary in the slightest. I mean, one of them is literally a walrus in a bow tie. Then there's this octopus fella. This fella creeped me out so much as a kid. I mean, just look at him. Look at those dead yellow eyes. Those are the eyes of someone who has probably committed mass genocide at some point. Oh, and we can't forget his voice.
Listen, I am 2 seconds away from calling the police.
Beat me again, I'll give you a special prize.
What do you want?
Now try the trophy challenge.
6-year-old me was absolutely shitting himself encountering him for the first time. And even now, the octopus still freaks me out. But that might all just be because I find octopuses generally kinda weird. Those slimy fellas are always up to something. Did you know that they're actually really smart? We can't trust them. Now pigs on the other hand, they're just silly. I don't know how you can make a pig scary at all. Well, I mean, Rare managed to do so. The main antagonist of Diddy Kong Racing is a giant anthropomorphic pig. I mean, to be fair, the first boss fight against him was kinda terrifying, considering his size, and how when he's close behind you, you just hear him stomping. No, what scared me as a kid was his giant head caved into the side of a cliff in the hub world. One that comes alive when you progress far enough, and when you do so, you have to fly into the abomination's mouth. You can't tell me that isn't terrifying, come on now. At the end of the game, he crashes into a planet and fucking dies, which was another thing that traumatized me. That was my first experience of witnessing death in a game. Huh. Star Fox 64, or Lylat Wars as it's called here in the UK for some reason, is an awesome on-the-rails shoot-'em-up game that's so perfect Nintendo cannot manage to make a sequel for it at all, so they just keep remaking it. Star Fox 64 is a short game that you can easily beat in one sitting, and if you run out of lives you have to restart the entire thing. It's old school. The game keeps fresh though on repeat playthroughs with multiple different paths you can take depending on what you do on each level you go through. So you're probably wondering, what's scary about this game? Well, at the end of the game, before you fight the final boss, you have to go through this creepy high-tech tunnel, and you have to do this alone, which is very jarring in the moment because the whole game before this, you've had your teammates constantly yelling at you every 3 seconds. Well, I lie a bit, you aren't alone during this section. You have the boss himself talking to you the whole time with his creepy ass icon flapping his lips whenever he speaks. He says a bunch of eerie shit until you get to the end of the tunnel, where you're jump scared by him. This is Andross, the final boss of the game, and yet he scares me a lot. I mean, just look at him. The scale is terrifying too when you remember that you're in a literal spaceship, and this is how big he is compared to it. During the fight, you have to shoot his eyes and hands, and eventually after you whittle his health down enough, his skin comes off to show you that he's actually a giant fucking robot, and he starts chomping and instantly comes straight for you. It's scary shit, man. Not to mention that there's an alternative fight against him where he isn't a robot underneath. Instead, you have to fight his brain and eyes after his skin comes off. Then after the fight, the tunnel starts to explode and you have to escape. It's just tense as shit, and this entire section as a whole has stuck with me. But only on the Nintendo 64 version. For some reason on the 3DS remake it didn't faze me at all. Just goes to show how creepy low poly graphics can be. Ocarina of Time is a game you've probably heard of, considering it's like one of the most highest rated games of all time. And yeah, I completely understand why it was for its time. Nowadays it hasn't aged all too well, but it's still a good time if you're willing to sit through the slow ass text boxes. And no, the extremely slow opening was not what traumatized me as a kid. Honestly, there's a multitude of things I could list off that freaked me out in Ocarina of Time, especially the bosses and dungeons. But if I were to specify what scared me the most, I mean, if you've played the game, you already know it's the bottom of the well in Kakariko Village. This mini dungeon is fucked up. You'd expect it to just be some sewage system and there'd be like poo monsters down there or some shit, but nope! The bottom of the well is a dungeon where people were tortured. In there you can find shit like cages and those wooden X's that were used to flay people. In the N64 you can even see faint blood splatters below them. There's terrifying enemies too, like the Wall Masters, which are just giant hands that fall down from the ceiling onto your head like a fucked up spider. Then there's Dead Hand, the boss that only appears when one of its severed hands grabs you and holds you in place so it can sliver up to you slowly while you try and struggle out of the hand that's grabbed you. Let's not forget the red blood splodges on the model of the thing. All of the blood was taken out in the 3DS remake, so they knew how fucked up this shit was. Shame that censorship wasn't a thing when I was younger. Let's not forget you have to go down there as Child Link, so you are severely under-equipped, basically turning it into a survival horror game. The Shadow Temple just after this is basically just a bigger version of the bottom of the well, and yeah, it's still creepy, but you're far more equipped when you see Dead Hand for the second time as Adult Link. You'll probably be nowhere near as scared, but you'll never forget your first experience down at the bottom of the well. I know I haven't. I never will. But this shit is nothing compared to the shit I've seen in the best Zelda game. Majora's Mask straight out of the gate is far more eerie than Ocarina of Time. That whimsical adventure feeling is just gone, and in its place is this. This fucker alone has traumatized so many goddamn people, with every passing day in game making it get closer and closer until— What the fuck? Honestly, there's so much shit in Majora's Mask that's terrified me and stuck with me to this day. It's probably why it's my all-time favorite Zelda game. Hell, I'd even consider it one of my favorite games of all time. So that's why I'm gonna talk about a few things that fucked me up for this one. Majora's Mask gets the special treatment for being the best Zelda game for 23 years in a row. And yes, I mean that. It is still the best Zelda game. In Majora's Mask, you visit 4 different areas, and each one has an eerie ambient track to it. But the one that's by far the creepiest is Akana Canyon, a wasteland where the dead roam. I mean, just listen to the music. In this area there's one house, and that house is swarmed by Gibdos. They're these creepy ass undead mummy looking fellas that scream at you if they spot you, making you freeze in place. Even if you defeat all of these enemies, you still can't enter the house because there's a little girl in there who refuses to let anyone in. But if you manage to get the water stream going around the house again, it distracts her, allowing you to sneak past and enter the house. And in that house, you find a half mummified dad in absolute agony, jump scaring you. I mean, the model of the dad is just look at it, look at this guy. This is horrifying. Then there's the Stone Tower Temple in Akana Canyon, where one of the mini bosses is Death himself. Well, Death in the Zelda universe at least. But to even get access to the Stone Tower Temple, there's a certain song you need to learn. There he is, fellas. The thing you were all probably expecting in this video. The statue that inspired the Ben Drowned creepypasta. Now I could definitely go into the creepypasta and what it is, but that's not what traumatized me. It was just the statue itself. The way it stares into your soul with its lifeless eyes and its evil grin. I fucking hate it. I was always scared that it would move when I wasn't looking, like a weeping angel. And I was always terrified it'd just be lurking in my bedroom at night watching me sleep. Even now just looking at it makes me feel so uneasy. Like I said, there's a bunch of stuff in Majora's Mask that freaked me out, and I could probably make an entire separate video just talking about them. Yeah, you know, if this video gets enough likes, I might just do that. The Nintendo 64 was a huge part of my childhood. I loved the system so much, but I also do kinda resent it for how much it kept me up at night in fear from the horrors that scarred me on the system. Like I said, all of this is very subjective, but I hope a lot of you can relate to some of these things so I don't seem absolutely insane. If not, or there was something I didn't mention that traumatized you personally, let me know down in the comments below. Oh wait, I also forgot to mention that I was also scared of the Great Mighty Pooh in Conker's Bad Fur Day as a kid. Please don't laugh.